This bag can technically be made using any yarn and any hook, but I'm going to be using Bernat Homemaker Deck. And the reason I like this yarn is because it's 100% cotton with a polyfill center, so it really is a sturdy bag. I'm using the colors Clay and Cream, and then I'm also using Peaches and Cream, which is 100% cotton, and you definitely want to use 100% cotton for the tassel, and I made it to match the cream color there. You're also going to need a 40mm wooden ring, or 1.5-inch wooden ring if you're in the United States. You're also going to need a 15mm wooden bead and a lobster clasp for the wristlet strap. You're going to need a 6mm hook and a 9x6-inch canvas zipper bag. This is necessary for the project, so don't skip out on this. You're also going to need a hot glue gun and glue sticks. To begin, you will chain in multiples of 3 until your foundation chain is 2 inches shorter than your canvas bag. For me, my foundation chain is 21. Then you're going to chain 1 for your turning chain. To double check that it is 2 inches shorter. Our base is going to grow in round 2, so you need it to be 2 inches shorter in order for this to not be too big. For round 1, you're going to single crochet in the second chain from your hook and in each stitch across. So just continue doing that all the way to the end, and I'll meet you there. Now we are going to turn and work down the opposite side of our foundation chain in the round. So you're going to single crochet in every stitch to the end, and I'm also crocheting over the top of my tail as I go. I do recommend that. It's very easy to accidentally increase with this particular method, so be very careful that you are not accidentally increasing. Each foundation chain should only be sharing 2 single crochet, except for our turning chain, of course. So if you have the same stitch count as me, you should have 42 singles at the end of this round. At the end of round 1, it should look like this. You're just simply going to slip stitch into the first single crochet of the round. Now for round 2, you're going to chain 1, and this chain 1 will not count as a stitch. We're going to make 3 double crochet in the same stitch as joining. Now for the rest of this pattern, I will be referring to this group of 3 double crochet as a granny cluster. So you're going to skip 2 single crochet and make a granny cluster in the next stitch. Again, that is just 3 double crochet. And you're going to skip the next 2 stitches and make a granny cluster in the next stitch. You're just going to continue repeating this process of skipping 2 and making a granny cluster in the next stitch until you reach the corner of the bag. And the corner of the bag is, of course, where you turn to work around to the opposite side. Now here I am at the corner of the bag, so we're turning around to go to the other side here. So we're skipping 2, and then we're going to start off with a granny cluster in the next stitch. And since we need to increase around this corner, we're going to chain 1 and make 1 more granny cluster in that same stitch. And then you're simply going to continue on as before, skipping 2 and making a granny cluster in the next stitch. And then you're just going to repeat this process to the end of the round. Skip 2, make a granny cluster. When you reach where you began, we are going to need to increase like we did at the other corner. So you're going to skip the last 2 stitches and make sure you don't count the slip stitch as a stitch. And we're going to make 1 more granny cluster in the same stitch that we began with. Again, we need to increase like we did at the opposite corner. So once you've made your granny cluster, you're going to chain 1 to match the opposite corner. And then you're just going to make what's called an invisible slip stitch. You're going to take your working yarn to the back, remove your hook from your working loop, insert your hook from back to front in the first double crochet, add the working loop to your hook and bring it to the back. That is an invisible slip stitch. Now we are going to start round 3 with a chain 1, and again that does not count as a stitch. Place your first granny cluster in the chain 1 space that you just made. So you're going to be working almost backwards. We're not going to be increasing in this round, so it's going to be real simple. You're simply going to make a granny cluster in between the granny clusters below. So you're going to continue doing that all the way around, and this time we are not increasing. So just repeat that all the way around, and I will meet you at the end. So here we are at the end. We're going to make another invisible slip stitch in that first double crochet, so just watch me closely. And we're just going to continue repeating that last round. So again, we're going to chain 1, and this will not count as a stitch. And you're going to make a granny cluster in the space between the granny clusters below. And you're just going to continue repeating this process all the way around, making 1 granny cluster between the clusters below. So just continue repeating that all the way around, making a granny cluster between the clusters below, and I will meet you at the end. So here we are at the end of round 4. We are going to make an invisible slip stitch in the first double crochet of the round. Now we're going to stop for a moment and just make sure that we're not making our bag too big or too small. So grab your canvas bag and slide your piece onto the bag. You definitely want it to be snug. You do not want it to be way too big. So mine is actually slightly too small, and that's perfect because this is a very stretchy yarn and I want it to be very snug so it's not flopping all over. So you're just going to repeat the last round until you're about 1.5 inches from the top there. And once you do that, I will meet you there. So I ended up making 10 rounds of granny clusters, and I'm going to end with a regular slip stitch and cut my yarn. And of course you're going to want to weave that tail in. Now I'm going to double check the fit of my bag, and again it should be very snug. As you can tell, it is slightly smaller than my canvas bag, which is perfect. Now we're going to change colors and add a band around the top to add visual interest, and I chose this cream color here. You're going to join in either corner. It doesn't really matter which corner you join in. And then we're going to chain 1, and this actually will count as half of our first single crochet. We're going to complete it at the end of this round. So we're going to start off this round by making a single crochet in the next stitch. This technique is going to make this bag look virtually seamless. And then you're just simply going to single crochet in every stitch to the end. And as you can see, I'm crocheting over the top of my tail as I go. So just continue making 1 single crochet in every stitch around, and I'll meet you at the end. Here we are at the end. We're going to finish the single crochet in the first stitch. So we're going to make an invisible slip stitch in the first single crochet. That means we got to skip the chain 1 there. Now this is technically a modified version of the invisible slip stitch. We are going to insert our hook under this working loop here, and we are going to create a faux V at the top. So slide your hook under your working loop and then add your working loop to your hook. Now we are just going to yarn over and draw through both loops in order to close the V of the top of that single crochet. So for round 13, we're going to chain 1, and again, that will count as half of our first single crochet. So we're going to single crochet in the next stitch and in every stitch around. So just repeat that all the way around, and I'll meet you at the end. Again, we're going to finish the rest of our single crochet there. So we're going to make a modified invisible slip stitch by skipping the chain 1 and inserting our hook from back to front in the first single crochet, bringing our working loop to the back, and then we're going to insert our hook under the working loop in the front and then add the working loop to the hook in the back. Now we're going to yarn over and draw through both of those loops in order to close that faux V. Now we're just going to repeat that last round until our band reaches the zipper. And for me, that is a total of 3 rounds, but depending on what yarn you used or how big your bag is, you may want to do more rounds than that. So I'm not fastening off just yet. I'm going to make sure that my bag fits this canvas bag perfectly. So it looks good to me. We're done. I am now going to join with an invisible join instead of a modified invisible slip stitch. So we're going to cut our yarn and then pull that working loop until our yarn comes all the way through our last stitch. Then you're going to take a yarn needle and skip over the beginning chain and insert the needle from front to back under both loops of the first single crochet. And then you're going to insert your needle through the back loop of the last stitch of the round to make the rest of the V. These methods make it look virtually seamless. And of course, you're going to want to weave in that tail really well so that it doesn't come undone. Now we're just simply going to plug in our hot glue gun, insert our canvas bag into our crochet bag, and we are going to hot glue our crochet portion to the canvas bag as shown. So I start at the corner and just use very little hot glue. It does not take much glue. You don't want to use too much or it's going to bleed through to the front and look very tacky. So as you can see, I am not using very much hot glue here. I also take a moment and hot glue the corners down. This is not necessary per se, but I like to keep the bag in place so it doesn't start shifting with use. I sell these bags, so I try to make it as professional looking as possible. Again, you do not want to use too much hot glue. Now we're going to add our front embellishment. So we're going to find the center, and that's where our embellishment is going to go. You're going to want to grab your wooden ring, and we are going to cut 2 strands of about 10 inches long with our tassel color. And again, I do recommend using 100% cotton for this. I'm just guessing here on the size. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to fold it in half like I'm showing you, and using the lark's knot, attach it to the wooden ring. And you're going to want to repeat that to the other side with the other strand I told you to cut. So you should have one on the top and one on the bottom. We're going to use one to attach to the bag itself, and then one we're going to attach to the tassel. So go ahead and attach it to the bag as I'm showing you. So I did end up getting my tape measure out to make sure it was in the dead center. It's very easy to not get it quite in the center, and then it's very obvious. So I am just fiddling around with it until I get it in the exact middle. Then I'm going to take a yarn needle and simply use these tails to sew it to the front of the bag. And then I'm going to flip up the wooden ring and take those tails sort of to the underside of the bag so that it's not showing through to the front. And then I'm just triple knotting it and cutting it to the quick. Now I'm going to take both tails at the bottom and thread it onto a yarn needle so that I can add my wooden bead next. Then you're going to open the tails below the bead and then just set it to the side for right now. We're going to create our tassel, and I use my fingers, but of course you could use a piece of cardboard. It's really up to you. But this piece of cardboard is a little bigger than I want it to be, so I'm going to use my fingers. And I'm just going to wrap my fingers 20 times. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to cut it later. So now you're going to cut the bottoms to create tassel tails. And then you're going to get your bag again, and using the tails below the bead, you're going to tie them in a knot around the center of those tails. And this is just going to secure the tassel. Now we're going to use a gathering knot to secure these tassel tails so they're not flopping all over the place. You're going to want to make it about a 1/2 inch below the bead. As you can see, I created just a small loop, and then I'm going to use that tail below the loop to wrap around the tassel at least 5 times. And then you're going to take that tail and slide it through the little loop that you made at the beginning. And then you're going to pull both tails until the knot goes underneath the area that you wrapped. Now, normally you would cut these tails, but don't cut these tails. We're actually going to use them to attach the tassel to the bag so it's not flopping all over the place. So I'm going to take one of the tails to the other side. And then I'm going to make sure that my tassel's in the center. So make sure that you're not crooked before you do this. And then I'm just going to flip up the tassel and find a place to wrap these tails around so that I can tie it in a knot. This does not have to be perfect, okay? Don't be a perfectionist. It's not that big of a deal. This is just to keep the tassel in place with use. So as you can see, I'm just choosing a spot that's close to where the center is on the bag, and I'm tying it in a knot on the underside of the tassel. Now you're just going to straighten out all tails so that it's straight and no wrinkles, and then you're going to cut the bottoms to make them even. That's what it should look like. Now, you can add a wristlet or leave it a clutch. Personally, I like to add wristlets. My customers seem to like that. This is technically another video, which I will link in the description box and above to the right here. This is my personal favorite wristlet pattern that I created. It is part of another tutorial, but you could attach it to your zipper if you chose, or my customers seem to like it on the side here. But once you make your wristlet, you are done. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial today. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching.